Okay, I think we can start. So, hello once again, everyone. My name is Jokūbas Sąlyga, and I will be chairing this panel, this first panel of today. I'm delighted to see so many of you here. It is my utmost pleasure that the KOMBINATAS festival is actually rapidly evolving into an occasion where you can meet fellow left-wingers from Lithuania, but also the festival is attracting more and more international guests. And the first thing I wanted to say is props to everyone who have made this year's festival possible. Now, this first panel of today is called Activism and Regional Solidarity in the Light of the War. And it is no secret that the war in Ukraine has really amplified the divisions on the left. Systemic analysis of the war, I think, far too often neglected the crucial role of Russian imperialism in the conflict and tended to blame the United States as the sort of only imperial protagonist in the international affairs. At the same time, some segments of the left have been accused of basically reproducing liberal foreign policy thinking. But what I think we can say with a certain degree of certainty is that perhaps the most comprehensive analyses of the war have been penned in East Central Europe, be it in Kiev or Warsaw, for example. And I think that this really highlights the crucial role of the activists from the post-Soviet space in developing nuanced accounts of the war, policy responses to it, and perhaps most significantly, the networks of solidarity with people in Ukraine, but also people in Russia. The purpose of this first panel of today is to reflect on both theoretical interpretations of and practical responses to the war. And we will do this obviously by listening to the voices from East Central Europe. Most of the themes explored in this panel, in this first panel, will speak directly to the concerns of the panel that follows immediately after, and which is focused on the oppositional movements in Russia. So it is my pleasure to introduce the participants of today's panel, and I will introduce each of them in the order of their presentations. The first contributor to this panel is Viktoriia Pigul. Viktoriia is a member of an active left-wing organization called Socialnyi Rukh, which translates as social movement, and as most of you will know, this movement has been at the forefront of organizing financial aid campaigns for volunteers, initiating various petitions calling for the write-off of Ukraine's external debt, and also subjecting the labor market reforms currently underway in Ukraine to critical scrutiny. It has also done a great deal, at least in my view, to highlight and publicize the positions of Ukrainian leftists vis-à-vis the invasion. Viktoriia's contribution will focus on the role of women in the army, the changing landscape of feminist activities in the midst of the war, and she will also talk about how the war has become a pretext for neoliberal labor law reforms. We are also delighted to welcome our second speaker, Nina Potarska, who is the coordinator of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in Ukraine. This international organization aims to end and prevent war, ensure that women are represented at all levels in the peace building process, defend the human rights of women, and promote social, economic, and political justice. Since the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the ensuing war in Donbass, Nina has been vocal on the topics related to sexual violence and impunity, the role of female soldiers, compensation for damaged property, among other things. Over the past couple of months, Nina has commented on the war for various international audiences and has appeared in renowned Western left-wing outlets, such as, for example, Democracy Now! The third contributor to this panel is Zofia Malisz, and Zofia is a researcher and member of the Polish left-wing political party Razem. One of the key objectives of the party since its foundation in 2015 has been to strengthen the Central and Eastern European perspective among the European left when it comes to issues surrounding Europe's defense of its eastern flank. Following the onset of the war, Razem worked closely with Ukrainian activists and aimed to center their needs on the party's political agenda. It has also sought to foster a dialogue among left-wing movements in East Central Europe to crystallize really, or at least to attempt to crystallize a unified position on the war. And that included, for example, the supply of arms to Ukraine, campaigns for cancelling Ukraine's external debt, and also fledging a welcoming environment for those fleeing the war. Apart from three international guests, we are also happy to have two local contributors to this panel, namely Andrius Bielskis, who is a political philosopher and the director of Demos Institute in Vilnius, and Eglė Murauskaitė, a security expert for the ICONS project with the University of Maryland. In his presentation, Andrius will survey the main responses of the international left to the war in Ukraine and offer a critique of some of those interpretations. I should emphasize that the perspective articulated in Andrius's contribution draws on the conversations with Ukrainian activists whom he visited last month. Finally, Eglė will touch upon the themes related to the portrayal of the war as an iteration of the new Cold War, the emerging discourse of value-driven policy amongst the Lithuanian society, migration, and contrasting interpretations of the war, East and West. Now, before we kick off, just a very short note concerning the organization of this panel. We are obviously first scheduled to hear the contributions from all the panelists. We may follow that up with some questions, perhaps after each contribution, one or two questions, if you have any. And it should take us approximately 2 hours to hear from all 5 contributors. It is a very large panel, as you can see. I hope that this session will put us in a good position to really generate some fruitful discussions around the key ideas articulated by the panelists. Now, I'm obviously taking up too much time here, so without any further ado, let me hand over the floor to our first speaker, Viktoriia.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Viktoriia. I'm a member of Socialnyi Rukh in Ukraine, and I am a member of European Network with Solidarity with Ukraine, the feminist group. I came from Kiev, and my presentation, I plan to start with some other information, but it was an impressive situation for me when I was in train. I met the women who visited her parents in Kharkiv, and all our way to Poland, she was crying and trying to share with me some emotional stuff, you know, because she was spending almost a week when the war started in the subway, and she lived there with her children. They have no opportunity to go away from this because of bomb attacks, and they needed to sleep there. They have no shower, bathroom, and other stuff, and it was so awful, and mentally, physically, and in different ways. And she said me that, you know, I had my perfect life in Kharkiv. I have the house of my dream, I have a car, a good job, and my child was happy, and everything was okay. And now all this is ruined, and he was crying so much, and I have no what to say to her. And then she said that, you know, now we live in a dormitory in Warsaw, and we're happy because we have lots of families who are experiencing the same, and we try to help each other. We have to, you know, cook for our children, and we like, you know, it's the close people, and you close people in your life, and they try to help, you know, go to the supermarket with the others, and they are united there. And I think that this fear, grief, and other stuff, it transformed to not feeling alone, because our grief is the same. And I live in Kiev under air sirens, and I need to say this, that now Ukrainians are robbing with the main human needs. It's security and feeling that you're in a safe place. I don't feel safe in any place in Kiev. And now I'm here, and my mother, brother, and husband, they're in Ukraine, and I'm feeling, like anxiety because of this risk of rocket attacks. But still, we have the support from each other. We have support from our European different organizations, friends, and everything, because this support is huge. And I think it's very important that I hear in the public space that everybody say that we have no right to not to stay strong. We will stay strong. We will win this our life, And I need to say that we have our right to resist, and we are trying to do our best to have this right and to stay alive in this war. And regarding this uniting, I want to say about the feminist initiative activities, because it's very important for now. And what I need to underline, that these feminist initiatives and left-wing feminists that I know, they are very close to women now, because before the war, they was doing a lot of educational activities, like courses. They were doing marches and other stuff. They do activities to defend women's rights and other. But now these activities are really focused on routine stuff and first aid needs. It's like medicines, clothes, food, shelters where somebody can live, because we have lots of replaced people. So the feminist initiatives, they are really close to women now. They can hear their voices. They know what the women need now. And I think that it's a little controversial moment, because on the other hand, it provides opportunities for humanitarian actors to seek women participation and guidance. And I think it's important to say that women are involved in the very important process now in Ukraine. So they need to have, additional incomes for the families, because men are in the armed forces, and very often women need to have a second job. They need to think about the money home for the families. Women in the hot front line, they in some cases they stay there because they need to take care about the elderly, about some people who cannot leave the occupied territories or something like that. They do really big job in the rear, and it's very important. And very important to focus on this, to take it into account. And I see potential spaces for feminist work, that all this grassroots activism, we can work with it, with women, and we need to transform all this work to some political work, because women need to be represented in the political life. They need to represent women needs, because now feminists know much more about women needs, and they need to to put it into the public space. So I think that on the other hand, we have like some problem, and I call it bad timing. Like it's women are doing lots, but we have it's not a time for the domestic violence problems, for example. It's not a time to think about gender quotas in politics and other stuff, because the war is on the first place now. It's our everyday agenda. But I think that we need to make all these questions on the first lines and first agendas too, because it's never a good time. But we need to do something, and to continue our work as much as we can. So another thing that I wanted to say, that often I see and I heard from women who are not involved in the feminist movement. They don't know a lot about it, and they always think that, my mother, she thought that it's okay. The politics and other stuff, it's something about these great people who are doing and who can decide everything. And I'm not involved in that, and it's okay for me. Like I am very individual, and I think that for us it's important to unite women and to let them know that they can decide. They can decide political life. They can decide, some social movements. So for me, it's like a direction that I want to improve, to do in Socialnyi Rukh in the future, and for now maybe, yeah. And I think that regarding this, now on our war agenda, we have a very big focus on the men's contribution to the war, because men are in the armed forces. We are talking a lot about the front lines and what are happening, because they defend us. But we have lots women's work on the home front, and we have lots of women in the army, and their contribution is also very important, and we need to talk about these too. And in this point, I want to mention something about women in the army now, because it's a lot. 50,000 women are now in the armed forces in Ukraine, and 1,000 of them are commanders, and the 2 are generals. And the newest information that 5,000 of them are on the hot front line. They do as much work as the men do. And what is important for me, that the Ministry of Defense, they said that there used to be some restrictions for women to about professions in the armed forces, and now women defended their right to choose every profession as they want. So we have women tankers, gunners, and even deep sea military diving. It was very harmful, and there were some restrictions for them, but it's okay for now. They can do it. And I have some I just wanted to mention that the main problem for women in the army is that army is confined to men. So we had lots of problem since the full invasion started. That all the clothes, shoes, and all this military stuff was really only for men, and women don't have these, and they have clothes of big size, and it's very bad for them. The women need some special stuff like hygiene and and even hairpins and all this stuff, and they don't have these. And it's important for us that now some women activists, they provide women with the needed stuff, but it takes really long time. And I wanted to say that it's important for us to say that the position of women will be much worse if the Russia seizes the power in Ukraine, because the Russian government, they hate women, they hate feminist activities, human rights activists, and all this stuff, and we need to fight for these, for our basic rights and for our human rights and other. And I know about the volunteer initiative Zemlячки. It's the women who provide women in the army with all needed stuff, and they do some very short interviews with the women who are now in the front line. And I think that these women can say about their position there much better than me, and I prepared a few quotes for you to and for these women to be heard, and I want to read some of them. So Christina, she is a senior sergeant, and she said that the most difficult thing is to get along with different men for such a long period, especially during shelling. Often they do not take seriously and do not trust serious activities for women. And but my commander is very feminist, and therefore I am in a command, and everyone must obey. And I'm very happy for these women, Marley is a sniper, and she said that it was easier for me than for those women who started fighting in 2014. They were just starting out, but now the difference between women and a man in the army is that a woman has to prove that she is worth something. Maria is a squad leader, and she shared that I went to the military registration and enlistment offices for 2 years, but they told me that women were not taken in the army. And Tanya is an anti-aircraft gunner, and her point is that I don't consider this courage. Here I know what and how to do, how to defend myself. It would be worse for me to sit in the bomb shelter and not know where to go. Nothing can scare me. I saw lots of pain, blood, but I reacted silently. And Masha is a combat medic, and she said that the main problem is, of course, hygiene. In the future, I hope that they will issue uniforms in size. Yeah, and all this stuff about war, frontline is in the agenda. You can one another way saw it and everything, but for me and for Socialnyi Rukh is important what are happening inside our country and in internal politics while the war is continuing all this time, because we try to live our lives as much as we can, like a routine life, to do some routine stuff, and for me now and for lots of people who live in the central Ukraine and the western Ukraine, we feel like it's okay that we hear air sirens. It's okay if the risk of rocket attacks is in all territory of Ukraine, but to live this ordinary life, we need our rights to be to have a right to defend our rights. We need some space to live and all this stuff. And I think that we have some problems with the internal politics because the war it's like has become a pretext for neoliberal reforms of our government. And it's not like very how to say, like people now in the war, they saw only agenda, all news about the war. They don't really care a lot about what is happening with internal stuff that the government could provide. And in order to this, I want to mention about the laws about workers' rights. And it's very awful for us because these laws will allow employers to cut workers' rights in enterprises employing up to 250 workers. In other words, the rights of the the majority of employees. And I want to mention that it's law 5371 and 5161. They were adopted by the Ukrainian parliament on July 19. It was my birthday. I don't know why it's not a good present. The law 5161 is about introducing 0-hour contracts, and it is signed by a president. And the other one, 5371, it's long, on amendments to certain legislative acts to simplify the regulation of labor relations in small and medium enterprises and reduce an administrative burden of entrepreneurship. So it is not signed by president, but the workers, the simplified regime will mean that very simple way to dismiss the workers, overtime work on spurious ground, or ignoring collective agreements in terms of wage payment, and it will also jeopardize workers' possibility to unionize and defend their rights by trade unions. So they want to cut trade unions because why? Why we need trade unions? Yeah, and adoptions these laws would aggravate social inequality and hamper social dialogue. And it's I don't know why is it happening. Really, these laws have been criticized by Ukrainians and international trade unions, and. The Parliamentary Committee on Ukrainian Integration to European Union, they said that it's inconsistent with the minimum social standards of European Association Agreement. Also, it does not comply with the conventions of International Labour Organization. And it does not meet the minimal standards of the Charter Fundamental Rights of European Union. So lots of organizations try to criticize these laws, but we have no a dialogue with our parliament about all these. We created petition in Ukrainian space, but people are not so active in signing this petition because they don't even know lots about their worker rights. I work unofficial in Ukraine, and I have
No, it's a joke because it's more than half population working
unofficial. Yeah, I don't have like a contract and.
Other parts with a flexible contract.
I'm in some political life, and I know this stuff because my comrades created the petition. They have like comments about all this law, but the ordinary people, like also my mother and her friends, they don't really know what is happening, and they will not sign this petition because it's not so popular, like the petition for example to I don't know what the last for LGBT rights. I'm happy that the petition to legalize the same-sex marriages, this was popular, but for the workers' rights, it's not so popular, and it's like some trend to know, as these laws are criticized by international organizations, together with the European Network of Solidarity with Ukraine, we created the petition on the international space, and we tried to collect signs there because the only man who can do something with these laws is our president, and he can veto them, and then we will try to do some dialogue with all these. But for now, it's important for us to spread about these, spread not only the Ukrainians but the international community too. So I would kindly ask you to sign the petition. I will send you links, and we really need this support because lots of people are asking me how they can help, in order to social movement activities. I'm very sure that we really need to have the support about all these campaigns, like this petition, and Zofia will tell you more about our other campaigns. But I think that workers' rights it's a very important issue for us for now, because the war will stop someday, but we will live in this country for the next life, and it's important to have basic rights, and not basic but lots of rights, and we try to fight for them. But still, I think that the main point is that we need to have lots of support, not to be alone of this war, and to win this war. And I really wait for this, like the women that I mentioned from the train. I hope that all of us will wake up someday, and we will win this. So I will stop there. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Viktoriia, for this brilliant opening of the panel. I thought that your contribution was very, very insightful. I suppose we can pick up perhaps one or two questions just for now that would sort of touch upon what you've already said. So are there any questions from the audience?
Hi. I was wondering if you have any practical ideas for, I don't know, people in Lithuania, just, people that self-organize and do various activities, how we could perhaps contribute in helping with these issues that you described. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. For our campaigns in the Socialnyi Rukh, I think that it's really important to have support with this worker rights fighting. It's we need to spread articles in the media, signing the petition and trying to say to President Zelensky that what are you doing, and when his politics is is not supporting from the international community, it's some sign for him to do something, and I think it's very important for us for now, and I think that we need some dialogue with the left-wing feminist initiatives. For me it's important because they work with women a lot, but they only provide them this humanitarian aid, but I think that they need to do some and they want to do some project, to involve these women, maybe some sharing some experiences, what to do, like to be closer to women, to organize something, and all of these. And then I think maybe Nina will help me with with these women issues, because she is working much more than me.
You want to hear my answer now? Yeah, I can, because next speech is mine.
You're the next speaker, yeah.
Yeah, but I can show the very concrete way, because a lot of refugees in Europe now, and they have problems with their works, language, socialization, and everything like this. In the same time, they are not very good in the local laws and local systems. So I know this experience because it's also my experience, because I bring my family to Krakow, and last 15 months my kids in Krakow, and I'm between Krakow and Kyiv. And for me it's a big challenge also, but I have privilege to be before in Europe, know languages, like in Poland it's like my second country, because my mother from Poland, so it's not like a very different country, but for many women from very small cities, it's a very dramatic changes. So they are frustrated about this experience. Sometimes they need psychological help. Sometimes they need and they feel like kids, because they are faced with a very new challenges every day. And this feeling when you are even don't know how to talk to people, in a shops, in a taxi, or in a transport, you can't ask anything. You feel like you're speechless, and you are helpless, and you need this help, but you need this help in a very polite way, not to put you in position of it's difficult to describe, but yes, it's like not feel like victim in this situation. So I don't know how you can create this space and create these ways, but I think there's very important help which you can provide to this society, because sometimes they are maybe looks like rude or not polite to the culture on society, but I really believe that it's because of the lot of fears, a lot of disappointments, a lot of confusion of this situation, not because they are not polite, because they are so afraid to be there. And if you are spent 40 years or 50 years of your life in a position of maybe somebody was like a director of some production. I know these stories. And now in Poland, local system just suggest them to cleaning. So for them, it's like a very big jump to the back. And not everybody ready to this, because I'm 40 years, I'm not student now. And for me, it's also a big challenge how I can reduce all my experience and all my level of life, which not appeared in one moment. I spent for these 20 years, 25 years. So I'm not ready to go into the, I don't know, living in a stadium, in the tent, and start all my life from the very beginning at 40 years, at 50 years, at 60 years. It's a very difficult. Thank you. And yeah.
Can I just add a small comment on top of this? I mean, it's amazing that you're saying all these things, Nina, from a very practical perspective, because from an academic perspective, I have been talking about this as a problem of refugee accepting countries. So from the very beginning, it's a very difficult relationship that I think Lithuania, at least, is only just learning to not objectify these people and to somehow start climbing out of this top-down approach to people who are recipients of aid. From a historical perspective, it has been among the key drivers of radicalization elsewhere. When big migrant flows have come to countries like France or Denmark or Germany from the Middle East and Africa, this feeling of the Netherlands as well as one of the prime examples, feeling of frustration, helplessness, and being treated like an object, having no voice, children having to do all lots of adult things for their parents and grandparents. I mean, this is not a new thing. There's so much has been written about this. And to me, just witnessing this unfold in Lithuania with like 0 lessons learned, it just seems like a huge problem waiting to happen. And while it is important to mobilize to help in the short term, I personally feel like we are way past the short-term solutions, and we need to start as a society reflecting on long-term, how are we going to integrate these people? How can we help them find a dignified way of life? How can we help them find their own feet and build their lives, be it here, be it somewhere else, but stop feeling like children, like they're being treated like children, because there's definitely so much more that we can do.
I just wanted to add what you said about the mental health issues, because at the beginning of the war, I did research about what is the mental health now, how people like are feeling themselves, and for the first months it was the adrenaline and mobilization of all the resources, and the people who have already some traumas, it was okay for the first months, but now we experiencing the trauma period, and it's awful not only for them for those who are in Ukraine, but for refugees it's a very big problem, because everything is unknown, and it's very big stress, and you try to stay strong for some time, and then you found yourself in some mental downing, and you think, oh my god, what I'm doing here, and all these, who I am, yeah. So it's very important for people to let them know that all these mental issues, it's not like something that they can feel shame about, they really need help, and they can have this help, and especially for refugees who are not at home, and everything is unknown for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Eglė. Thank you, Viktoriia. Thank you, Nina. I think I'm going to hand over the floor to you now, so for your contribution.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Viktoriia. She reduced my report. So I'm happy that I can focus on a bit other things, but it's sometimes I'm stuck in some philosophical ideas, because I spent 8 years close to contact line, because from the very beginning of this war I started to my first research about women perspective during the conflict of it's like how it's affect everyday life, because you know that women role in society, it's reproductive, and which mean a lot of reproductive labor, and if infrastructure is destroyed, and women very connected to infrastructure, like kindergartens, hospitals, roads, and everything in Ukraine, it's everything covered by women. So if we destroy all this infrastructure, social infrastructure, we destroy women's life. But this duty nobody cancel for women. So they continue doing this every day during the war, after war, and nobody ask it, and nobody recognize this input to the society. And in the time of the first stage of the conflict, during the huge heroization of the military and this military approach in this conflict, I was shocked how it's invisible women like everyday life, like also heroism, because if you're not feel the safe, and if you're trying to find a time when it's not shelling, and during this you are up from your basement to cook something and go back, so you for example in the line for the humanitarian aid, you always meet women, so they are connect the like this society on the horizontal level. And for the peace building approach, when we are trying to build the peace or healing society from the conflict, we also rely on women, because they communicate on horizontal level. For example, in Ukraine, all groups in kindergarten and in groups in the school through Viber, it's all moms groups, because we are communicate on the between intersexual communication, because for men it's just a job and family. It's very often just like this in Ukraine. I don't know this local context and your so, and it's just the small background of my way of thinking and my approach to this conflict, and to who I am in this situation, and how I can act in this situation. Because now from 2016 I'm working like a national coordinator for WILF, Women International League, and you know this background of this organization, and it's, for me, it's a left feminist organization, and where I can speak about everything I want to speak, and I'm very familiar with this approach, and I'm very happy to be there, and very happy to be active and productive in this, because I'm a co-founder of Socialnyi Rukh also, but I switch a bit my focus, because I can participate at all in all activities in everywhere, so my thoughts always with Socialnyi Rukh, but I think my mission is be more active in from the other side, and help other activities activity to Socialnyi Rukh, for example, on UN system, and how we can bring this social critique and critique of labor code and critique of everything from a left perspective, because human rights society, it's a bit neoliberal. And they always forgot about social economical rights. So I want to bring this approach to this society and be like I see my mission like a link between human rights and social and labor rights. And also I'm a member and like a personal member of a network it's a women network of inclusive dialogue. It's a network of a number of women organizations which focus on how we can build peace, but maybe not now and maybe after conflict. But we need to save us, our organization, our activities to continue to be, because it's not really easy. And the main focuses of our activity in this network, it's gender reforms, and we couple of years we promoting, fighting, and advocate the social economical problem, and also Istanbul Convention, because it's a framework for domestic violence issues, and gender and militarization in society, but not just in Ukrainian society, in around us, because not everyone and even not every of you ready to take a gun to protect yourself. But we understand that after 2016, the society in Ukraine and in Russia and start to militarize with the language, with different activities. For example, from the school to university to any public activity, so it's start to be more militarized than before, because I remember that, for example, I have a son, he's 20, and during his time in kindergarten, for them was forbidden to use any gun in the kindergarten. But now it's very welcome everywhere. So I can compare how the militarization affect society from the kindergarten, and I can like make my own decision about this situation. I just mentioned that it exists, so we are in this. So how we can do with this, or how we can live with this, it's a question how we can do this. And also we need in this network, we are trying to make, because we are working with a very grassroots organization in the east, central, in the west a bit less than in the east, but main focus was close, the territories close to contact line from one side and from the other side. And when we go to help people, because for us it's a women and a human being, and human rights, it's a central point of our activities. And when we are trying to help people, we violate with the rules of the states, or so-called states, because these states exist to protect states and borders of these states and rules and laws and everything. But sometimes they makes everyday life of ordinary people unbearable, because of for example, before the 24th February, we had a big problem with situation how the Ukrainian government recognized people from non-government controlled territories, because they had the same passports but not the same rights. So it was not so good situation for human rights and we also mentioned these like drivers for conflict, because it's like for Russia it was like an entry point to destroy the system from the Institute of Citizenship, because they try to share this citizenship of Russia for all these territories. And for these people, there was a key to survive, because they feel like excluded from any society. So, and we also need to pay attention to this also, because I'm not going to advocate any Russian at all, but I also don't want to advocate Ukrainian government that made also a lot of fails, but it not mean that I can, I don't know, excuse this invasion and because they destroyed our lives at all. And therefore my work is not always welcome by Ukrainian government, because we critique Ukrainian government, also because of the restriction and in social sphere, and because of this situation which going on now with the labor rights. And I'm on the website of Peacemaker. It's like a special website for treaters of motherland, because it's like explained this on this site, because I was able to work from one side in another side. And for me it was extremely important to be in touch with the people who have to be on other side, because not everybody who in other cross the border, it's not our enemies. Because in Ukraine, Ukrainian government now try to build this narrative like all, for example, Russians, it's our enemies. And all Ukrainians, it's enemies of Russians. In another narrative, it's like all people on occupied territories are enemies. But it's not true, because the reason why you are in this place very different. And we are like activists and like humanitarian aid activists, like feminists who help in humanitarian sphere. We are trying to build this connection between people to help these people. And of course, government and so-called government not welcome these activities. And also I was detained for a couple of days in Donetsk, also because for them I'm also like a spy, or I don't know what they mean. So it's of course it's not about my risk or I don't know something about this. It's just also I want to put the like a full picture of this story, because conflict, it's not just black and white. In this in conflict, in every conflict, we have human dimension, and we need, and I feel that I need to make this choice. Where is my place? Close to the people and their needs, or I need to protect my government, or I need to support my government. So, and sometimes it makes me mad, because I don't know how it's possible, because I'm a feminist, left feminist, and I always critique my government. So, but sometimes I have to protect them, these guys. But I have to protect them outside of Ukraine, but I also continue critique them inside of Ukraine. But I know that they make a lot of bullshit. Continue, because they're the same. It's the same like guys like before war. Same guys with the same ideas. But now they are heroes. So I think many lefts in other countries, in this stupid situation, how we can act. But maybe it's like, it's my suitable approach, because I prefer to be among people. And maybe I want to hide on the back of these people. But I really believe that we need to build this solidarity between Russian left and feminist activists, Lithuanian, Latvian, Poland, and American and others, because our governments not really pay attention to ordinary people. And I don't know how, if we are continue playing this game, because this game of power, this game of interests of governments and big money, but I trying to understand where is our own interest in this, because all of us just suffer from this. We are maybe more, but you are also, but you will feel this effect during this winter very good, and you and maybe you will hate us like Ukrainians, because in Poland it's also popular now, like Ukrainians, you have to go home, it's enough. Yes, and it's also, and I understand, because we lost our past comfort life, but we need to build common future, but maybe not as before, and maybe not according to other rules. I don't know. Maybe maybe now it's time to understand what is the really common values we have. Not values like something untouchable, but it's something really concrete, like solidarity, like recognize our human rights and our human dignity, and focus on this first, and not see before you enemy. Because if you are mark me like I don't know, I'm from maker side, so it's mean that I'm against Ukraine, so it's mean that I'm right or wrong Ukrainian feminist, so maybe it's mean that I'm pro-Russian, of course, yes, according to Ukrainian context, I help Kremlin, but it's not true. And so it's easy to go this way, mark other people, and also I heard that others mark, for example, peace builders or peace how it's like peace no not peacemaking, like a pacifist, yes, it's a peace, but it's like maybe people who are very naive and they want to escape from this. Maybe I also want to escape from this planet to moon or somewhere there, but because I'm very peaceful, and I hate to be aggressive. I hate people who force me to be aggressive. And it's really not my way to communicate with this society, with other people. But sometimes situation force us to do this. So maybe somebody ready to this, but maybe somebody not. And maybe it's like escapism from this situation. So after these 8 years, I understand that I'm not ready to judge anybody, because we don't know how we can go through this way to some point, if we are really trying to think about this, because sometimes people just repeat something, not really think about this. So I don't know how to finish this speech, but I really demand for solidarity and more solidarity and less judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, for your excellent contribution. I think there is a lot to take from it. Once again, perhaps we can have 2 questions from the audience. Yeah.
It's interesting because we suggest another scenario of the panel, and now we are yeah we just following process, so we are very flexible. Yes.
No, I think that was a plan, right?
No.
Okay, so there is this triangle that I observed, like a glorified hero who is fighting the objectified victim, which is just, waiting until it's over, and dehumanized aggressor who is like, violent and stuff and just should be destroyed, and like Yes, and so like this triangle is just very like a trap, and I see no ways out of it in like in even in communication here, like in anywhere. Like there is a question, where are you from? Then there is an answer to this question, and then where in this triangle are you? Like
Yeah.
and then
It's very easy.
Very easy.
And our minds works like to simplify our reception of this reality, because it's very easy to put person in some place and just get, yes, I know you.
Yeah, and then there is this gender thing. Like, if you're a girl, then most probably you're objectified victim because just you are not fighting right now. If you are like a man, but like I don't know from Ukraine, then probably like who you are. Why are you are not at the war?
Yeah, why you are a man and not participate?
Then
Why
like
you're not
question
fighting?
mark, like what the hell? aren't you like supposed to be a hero? So my question. Have you been observing some ways out of it? I don't know. Did you like really see some good examples how to break this circle and how to probably in like the very very basic communication to not to be in this trap all the time, because there should be the way out.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know where is it. So when you know this, it's also some psychological trick when you are not. It's if your reality unbearable, you go inside of you, because you are hide from this in your I don't know dreams, and yeah, and sometimes it's a good way to find the maybe sources, because if you're not irritated even to recognize that somebody want to put you in this triangle, you not play this game anymore. So if you are not put on yourself this role, you're not playing this game.
But then you're not communicating, like you're not
No.
like it's internal, like just very close, like cocoon
Yeah.
state, and that's not
But
healthy.
if it's I think this approach I used when I understand that I'm feminist, and my neighbors not understand why I'm feminist and what it mean, and but I understand that. Maybe because they are not understand what it means, because they are acting like me, but I can call myself a feminist, but she not. Maybe I don't need to feel annoying or irritated on this situation, and I really feel that I'm like in a capsule now, because we are in our group. We are trying to focus on our own resources. Focus on our rest, our psychological health, and other things, just to save ourselves, because it's extremely important. And if you are in good mental health, you can accept more hell of this world. But if you are in a trauma, you are losing this balance. So we need care about each other, and now we are trying to share more empathy through our circles, like feminist circles, because it's also very feminist approach, and save us from the hate, because hate destroyed us from inside. And I really believe that I want to feel I want to feel this feeling at all. So I understand the steps why they do it this. I understand that they are not right. I not accept this, but it's not mean that I have to hate. I also feel, but it's not the hate. I'm angry, but angry it's more productive, because if you are hate, you destroy yourself. But if you're angry on something concrete, and you can act through this angry. So it's like we are trying to work with this triangle.
Thank you, Nina. Any other quick questions or reactions? If not, I mean, we will have hopefully an hour for a more elaborative Q&A session after that, so we can return to what you've said. Now I'm delighted to introduce our third speaker, Zofia Malisz from Razem.
Hi. So I think it was a brilliant question, and we are actually here to. I think everything we do and what Nina and Viktoriia were talking about, what I want to talk about is to break this stereotyping and putting us into certain roles. And this is not only important on a kind of a relationship level between us as we sit here, but it's immensely important on the political level. So I have, there is one example that I have seen which spoke quite directly to that stereotype of a Ukrainian female victim. So Viktoriia and other feminist activists in this European network for solidarity with Ukraine that Razem and many other European and non-European actually organizations belong to, we noticed that there was a global a letter from feminists globally, some of them very famous, basically denying the right to armed resistance to Ukrainians and particularly Ukrainian women. And comrades, Ukrainian feminists in our network have gotten together and have written a response for that, affirming, first of all, their very existence and their voice, reminding global feminists that the Ukrainian feminist movement has existed for a while. And it has a right to basically affirm themselves, and this is their voice, like basically, not letting themselves be pushed into that kind of a victim, silent victim position somewhere in Eastern Europe, and then basically demanded the right to armed resistance. And that is an incredibly powerful manifesto that I also encourage you to sign. You can sign this. So that was definitely one example, and another example is what I want to actually talk about today a little bit more, which is options for Eastern European, Baltic, Nordic. Also, basically, when I say Eastern European, I mean the Eastern. Not only the post-Soviet space, that is also Georgia and possibly Central Asian countries, Moldova and so on, Ukraine, but the eastern periphery of the European Union, including Finland, perhaps. But mainly Eastern Europe in that kind of conceptual space, as we and particularly the West have it, right? Like. Slightly invisible area where so many people with funny languages live, and these countries kind of, you cannot tell one from the other, and the faces are kind of similar as well, which is not true. Very diverse ethnically region, as we know, but so we are also being stereotyped, and this has been painfully and existentially made clear in this situation of Russian aggression, right? Where basically everybody had an opinion about on the West, particularly what we should do, what the Ukrainians should do. They should give up. They should let the US and Russia negotiate their fate, right? And then for my own country and our position, all those Russophobes, the Poles, they are always against the nationalists, and it's like so we really it has become now, it's not a joke anymore. It's not something that we can like at some meetings in the US or Western Europe try to explain to them our position and what the actual realities locally and histories and everything are. We tried to do that for years and talk to them, but when it came to an existential threat, unfortunately, these stereotypes somehow jumped out at us, and this is where we are trying to also give a voice to movements, individuals, the left from the region, in order to break that situation. Okay, I am a Razem member. This is a Polish party that was a left party that was founded in 2015 by a bunch of socialists and ex-Greens and anti-imperialists that were standing in front of the US embassy protesting the war in Iraq, that were standing with Yanis Varoufakis against austerity, against Greece. That was like the very beginning of Razem, and we have had like a collective leadership, but One of our media personalities is whom you may know is Adrian Zandberg, a very charismatic politician who has given a stellar performance at an election debate in 2015. And it made our very, very fresh movement that was founded that year and practically existed on Facebook in the kind of consciousness of the Polish public, got 2.5% votes, which did not bring us into Polish parliament, but got us some subsidies, which I can recommend. Having for the beginning of a left movement, we did try to use these subsidies well, but we also concentrated on building our digital democracy and spreading and building our communication tools, which this experience of how to communicate left ideas in a society that has zero class consciousness, or which is so very common in Eastern Europe, that basically this class consciousness was forcibly replaced with some, liberal tropes, and people actually want social policy, but they vote liberals, which I think is kind of common, or conservatives, right? They are angry, or either they do not know because of lack of class consciousness what they like. They know what they need in their everyday life, but the political scene is so skewed and ideologized on the liberal conservative side that it's very, very difficult to identify those political movements and forces that might actually listen to them and do something for them, right? So history of Razem, right? So we developed our communication techniques, we developed our digital democracy, very kind of a bottom-up movement, and then we joined a coalition in 2019 of social liberals and post-communists, and got 6 of our members into the Polish parliament, 4 of them women. We since managed to profile also several of these MPs as known politicians that are respected for our very policy driven way of doing politics. So we do not engage. We try to. I don't know what it's like in Lithuania, but in Poland, basically the political scene is dominated by this tribal war between liberals from the Tusk party, Donald Tusk, the former president of Europe, and Jarosław Kaczyński's party, which is a kind of a conservative, maybe a bit social party. And so the whole media scene and the whole politics is kind of defined by these 2 warring tribes. And it should be very, very easy, actually, and it's kind of an obvious choice for a left movement to use this situation and basically show, okay, we do not belong. Our language is different, and we do not want to participate in this war between tribes. And this is partly also part of our success, that we go to the bottom of what people need, that we break out of this kind of a ritual fight in the media. This took a while to get a space in the media at all. Of course, getting into parliament helped quite a lot, but it took us 2 years in order to get actually a chair in some for example, in the TV station on the liberal side and on the TV station on the conservative side to try and kind of bring this consistently this wedge into that tribal war. They tried really hard, so we have had. So I am really proud, and I'm proud of other movements on the left in Europe, in Eastern Europe, just for this. If they have managed to survive in this neoliberal, hostile environment that has been created after the fall of the previous regime, and kind of the capitalist transformation has plowed society and our economies very, very thoroughly. Via very often these kind of shock therapy tactics that we are now observing are starting in Ukraine. This has become an extremely hostile environment for even modern left movements, right? So we have been always faced with the kind of a red scare threat, You cannot say anything even remotely left from the neoliberal doctrine or Thatcherite kind of Reaganist doctrine and not be called a communist, right? So we all, in Razem, we know these kind of communication problems, and somehow we, in the recent, I can really say it's like a year or two, we have broken the mold and got our space in the media because of that consistent policy, science-driven and value-based communication, and a couple of charismatic people like Magda Biejat, Maciej Konieczny, and Zandberg. So now it's not like, so the Polish media law, basically in an election campaign, gives equal, at least in theory, equal space for campaigning and agitation on TV and radio to every single party that is standing. In 2015, we got 7 seconds, literally, the famous 7 seconds for Partia Razem, despite that, debate performance of Zandberg, there was quite a lot of interest. So this has changed, and I think this is something that is a great success of the party, so I guess in terms of profile of who we are and our history, that's where we are. Okay, so I think apart from to define who Razem is and what we're trying to do, our party history is another thing. Another thing is also maybe for you interested, coming from different movements. If you profile a party, you think like, who are the members, right? What kind of ideologies do they represent? So Razem is also a very varied party. From there are Blairists and kind of classics, Western 50s, 60s social Nordic model democracy proponents. There are early Kautskids. There are people that even dab in Leninism, but in Poland, basically before Russian aggression and before I discovered the existence of campists and people like that on the West mainly. I think in our internal debates in Razem, trying to structure ourselves and thinking about policy, I don't think any of the Bolshevik ideologues were mentioned even once. Like the word Lenin just doesn't exist in our vocabulary. We have our own socialist history, also in Poland, of course, as you do. One of our goals in Razem is also to basically bring, to drive also some leftist historical policy. So we are trying to push back on that kind of success that the right wing has had actually in Poland, hijacking the historical independence movement for themselves. People in Poland largely forget that the very first government of the first Polish Republic was a socialist government. That there were socialists fighting with Nazis against Nazis in the Second World War, and so on and so on. So we're trying to reclaim that. But as I said, another very, very important part is actually reviving and trying to strengthen the trade union movement in Poland. So this is a paradoxical situation. If you recall, a great, in many ways politically, but also in numbers, trade union in the 80s, Solidarność. This is a paradox that those people that were involved in that movement were the first ones and the main ones that after the change of the regime, they were the first ones to dismantle and take away trade union rights and basically subscribe to that neoliberal religion. And again, this kind of coincides. I don't know if there's a correlation, but in the last year or two, there have been actual strikes happening in large industrial companies, private companies. For example, Solaris in Poznań, which is owned which is a bus making company. Owned by Spaniards. We were there. We are trying to bolster that from the parliamentary political side. There are small trade unions that we work with. There is a big All Poland OPZZ, which is like the greatest right now in terms of size and importance. trade union and the teachers trade union. So this is a big, very strong and important leg of our activity. And yeah, so I was supposed to say more about how about Ukraine, right? I mean, I rely on you to kind of point me to to a direction this should go. So of course, when we always have had statements prepared by the National Council about our so-called Eastern politics, polityka wschodnia, right? So how do we, and always, like, for example, regarding Belarus or Russia and Ukraine, our main principle was to support emancipatory democratic movements eastwards from Poland. So when there were protests in Moscow, we supported the Russian people and issued a statement for their struggle for democracy. We have not supported any individual like Navalny or whatever, but always our position was to listen to the people in that in the country that is kind of threatened and under authoritarian regime like that, like the Putinism. I think for me personally, and for lots of people in the party and on the left in Poland, 2014, the annexation of Crimea was where it became very clear to us that what we have, so the stuff that now Western Europeans are discovering suddenly in 2022, that Russia is not what they were thinking it is, and it's actually really almost like a neo-fascist, turbo-capitalist petrol state. Like, some people are discovering it now, that is kind of imperialistic. They have just discovered it, right? We were also under the impression, I was strongly under the impression that, okay, capitalism, but Russia is changing, you know, maybe it will indeed, this kind of idea that the Germans were having Wandel durch Handel, right, that maybe if we strengthen our ties this way, some stuff will start moving in the right direction. It looked quite okay, at least Russia was kind of also pacified on that imperialist level, we thought. But in 2014, for me, it was a big shock. So I joined the party in 2016, and there were two motivations for me. One was the annexation of Crimea and the green little men in Ukraine, and the rise of the right wing in Poland. So it was clear to me and to many Razem people that when Putin said A in Crimea, then he has to say B, right? And this happened this year, of course, and so we were quick to react and basically support all sorts of sanctions against Russia and support armed and unarmed resistance of Ukrainians. And it was not only us that had that quick reaction and an immediate kind of realization what this actually means, that indeed, Russian imperialism is not going away, and that is getting crazily stronger. And that was manifest in an immediate kind of huddling together of Nordic and Eastern European and Baltic movements, however big or small they are, on the more kind of political side, together, you know, within 1 week or 10 days, I don't know, on the 8th of March, I guess, we met in Warsaw and issued this statement with the postulates that I have just listed, clear and unequivocal support for Ukrainian resistance, clear and unequivocal condemnation of Russian imperialism and support for Ukrainian sovereignty, and the list of sanctions that we were demanding. So this was us, Socialnyi Rukh, from Ukraine, that also came to Warsaw, Lithuanian Left Alliance. The Finns have immediately, you know, also come. Our friends from Romanian Demos, two Czech parties, one of them very fresh, Budućnost, and Lewice, which is, I understand, slightly older. If I'm forgetting someone, sorry, I can, Andrius, maybe you remember. So, and this was like, yeah, this expression of solidarity in the region, which is one of the obvious signs also that movements and the leftist thought, the modern leftist thought in the region is maturing. And this is also, or has matured, and the subsequent steps that we as a group, as this kind of a contact group that we formed, we're taking, meeting online on all sorts of issues, not only Ukraine. We, for example, recently in Warsaw in June, during our Congress, we have also invited, for example, a very inspiring young movement from Hungary, which is called SIKRA, and we talked about housing. So, for example, we had 2 or 3 hours of discussions of the availability of housing for young people, the rising prices and of real estate and rents, how the inflation and basically mortgage prices, monthly rates are influencing people's lives, and so it's clear that. Well, it was clear before, but that we have a kind of over the years commonalities, incredible commonalities in the region, in the Eastern European region, that stem from the neoliberal realities and the transformation. We have noticed, of course, that there are a lot of problems that we have them in common, like housing and trash contracts and the precarity of employment. The weakness of trade unions that is influencing quite a lot of other things socially, and so on and so on. So it's not only the existential security threat and the kind of the collective trauma. It's an incredibly strong connection that we have between us, which is this collective and historical ongoing trauma stemming from Russian imperialism. I mean, it's like. When I woke up in February, it was like like people are saying this was the end of history and now history is back. It was quite literally for me, history is back. All the things that my grandma and great-grandma, when we were coming for lunch on Sunday, were telling us about Russian atrocities being brought from the area where Poles were before, like Lithuania or Belarus. My family comes also from here, and they were brought to Kazakhstan, it's like they were talking about this and instilling this trauma, also like trauma of females, right? Women that had to keep up with rapes, violence, their husbands being taken away, killed, and so on. We thought that this was the end of it, right? But then on one day, all of that kind of resurfaced, and we are still processing that trauma together, right? As a kind of a regional left as well, and people in general. And a lot of that solidarity also stems from that. So the collective trauma, the commonality of interests and experiences due to the neoliberal reality and the transformation is what makes us come together. I think will continue bringing us together, but on a kind of a forward-looking note, it's also the fact that what I was saying that at Razem we do not really cite verses from compete in citing verses from Lenin, which Trotsky citation is your favorite, right? This doesn't happen, but we think a lot, and I think lots of these movements, like the young movement, Budućnost or SIKRA, are spontaneously or intentionally devising and showing new innovative ways of what modern left these days looks like and is being effective, and it's growing in that and having success also in a very, very difficult environment. A lot of creativity, a lot of new communicative techniques, but also kind of how to basically have a dialogue with the society which has no class consciousness, how to have a dialogue with the society and be the avant-garde that is trying to be in this consistent continuous dialogue to bring about change towards a more social basically society in our region. So I think this is something we can offer on the Eastern European left right now. This innovative approach. We are a modern left. We are not stale. We are not stuck in ideological ruts and routines. So a lot of movements on the West are basically in these echo chambers. They have some supporters that understand Marxism from A to Z, and they talk, they have journals and they have festivals and they talk in that language, but somehow this language does not appeal to the people that they are, like to talk about, but they have no contact with the people, right? So this kind of ideologized way of practicing socialism or trying to transmit left ideas has basically been not only bankrupt, been shown to be bankrupt, for example, in Western Europe recently on the country level, but also on the geopolitical level. The main reason why we, as Eastern European leftists, have problems communicating with Western European leftists, I think, is that they refuse to take themselves out of that ideologized, privileged, very convenient kind of world of sometimes even 68, kind of dating back to exactly some kind of America's enemy is my friend type of ideas, and some of them really, like, we have been in situations where, particularly in the Spanish-speaking world, so the further away you go from our region, the harder it was we had to fight for Socialnyi Rukh to get the mic on some events, and it still happens. Right, there will be one event coming where we are basically in Germany, where we basically said, sorry, but there is an anti-Semitic kind of anti-Ukrainian participant, like a token Ukrainian, a token pacifist that you invited, and you did not consider talking to Socialnyi Rukh and give voices to socialists on the ground that are also fighting against the aggressor. So Socialnyi Rukh will probably decide not to come. So and they basically did not agree for these diverse voices that do not fit into their ideological, very, very kind of a traditional, let's call it this way, leftist point of view. They just don't want to hear it. It's too inconvenient, right? So, but we have to, as regional left, as we sit here, this is actually our duty to, give voice, try to fight for the voice for Socialnyi Rukh, talk about our realities. We understand also we have to find, I think this whole Russian invasion was also a moment of emancipation for us. A moment where we decided, where we saw who we are with clarity, and that's I am quite sure that our values and the way we, by we I mean, for example, the people that met in Warsaw several times now from the regional left and the Nordic left, we have identified our values and duty correctly, standing on the side of Ukrainian resistance. And calling out, and calling quite clearly that Russia is an imperialist state and Ukraine is a sovereign country. Campaigns, or I don't have time for that.
And let's leave that for the
Okay.
Q&A session.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Zofia. Okay, as we are running out of time and probably going to take slightly more than initially planned, I'm gonna hand over the floor to Andrius directly. I think Zofia's presentation is a really good segue into what Andrius is going to say as well.
Thanks. My title is why, in brackets, some Western left's response to the war in Ukraine is wrong. First of all, I would like to start with this observation or thought that there is some strange similarity between three events that occurred recently over the past years, namely Brexit, Donald Trump, and the invasion Putin's invasion of Ukraine. My point would be that, of the top of my head, that actually there is something similar, of course, and that it is all of these three things is a reaction to global economic globalization of some sort, but of course in very different ways. And actually the reactions of the left in Europe to this invasion is also telling. And just to jump ahead of myself, there is also a similarity between left wing's response in some European countries, like in Germany and elsewhere, and that of radical right. So for example, 40% of Die Linke's supporters and members, only 40% of them support. 40% of them do not support Ukraine, and so the same number applies to AfD, right? Alternative für Deutschland, right? So there is something telling about it, and I think we need to reflect, reflect about it. So my talk is going to be really to survey some of these, as Jokūbas said, some of these responses in Europe, and mainly in Europe. I was in Ukraine a month ago and I went with a colleague of mine and brought a humanitarian aid to NGOs there in Lviv and Kiev, and met with comrades from Socialnyi Rukh and brought their message, and I'll summarize towards the end of my talk. But also soon after, I was in Aveiro in Portugal, where a European summer university was organized by Transform, and European left in European Parliament, the fraction of the left in European Parliament. And I mean, the title of the conference was really, I mean, building peace and fighting imperialism. And so there we met. There were obviously comrades from Razem as well, but really we kind of fought a battle and trying to get this voice and saying what East European left thinks about it. And I think at the end of it, I think we won the argument. And that's what ultimately I want to, say here, that in this case, East European, I mean, I granted that there is, what is West European left versus East European left. This is very contentious distinction, I mean, all sorts of, a variety of lefts, in Europe, in Eastern Europe, and Western Europe as well.
The Portuguese bloc.
Yes, Portuguese bloc, but my thesis is very simple. I think we are right and they are wrong, and that's it. But let me actually go through. So it's a sort of conclusion. But let me actually go to more detailed argument, and first of all, the kind of the survey as I promised. Well, we met in Portugal. Well, obviously many members of the Linke, the left party of Germany, was there, and what we noticed actually is, I mean, all of these parties and organizations within that gathering were, of course, condemning officially Russian aggression, and this was this summer, so it's much later than you guys had these discussions when the war just started. But well, they were unofficially, So, for example, the Syriza youth, from a lot of people from Syriza youth was there, and well, I mean, unofficially they were still calling Russian invasion as a special military operation. And when there was a kind of discussion in smaller groups, some guys were saying like, Mr. Zelensky is a fascist dictator, Well, these sort of opinions. So really, I mean, this is partly ignorance, but not only ignorance, but yes, in that gathering, what we noticed that Portuguese were really understanding, and the bloc, I mean. They were trying to listen. They wanted to listen what both Polish left and Lithuanian left and others were trying to say. But also Finnish left officially. They are left alliance in Finland. They are officially still against the expansion of NATO, right? But they're saying, well, it's not anymore so clear, and of course 70% of Finns now support the expansion towards NATO, or joining NATO. So what were the key responses from the international left? Well, one of them was neutrality, that we of course need to be neutral. I'll come back to this issue. Another one that was voiced in this summer university in Aveiro in Portugal was when a lady said, well, there is a parallel between this war in Ukraine and that of the First World War in 2015. It is imperialist war between competing global imperialist powers, NATO and Russia, right? And I raised then the point that, well, it's not actually the parallel. If anything, the parallel is 1939, right, when Hitler's Germany is occupying, invading Poland. Well, and of course, we know these more or less. Other arguments were that it is NATO to be blamed first. I mean, as a powerful imperialist alliance, defensive alliance. So, for example, World Socialist website, they are Trotskyist, the International Committee of the Fourth International, in one of their piece condemns Mélenchon's support, in inverted commas, the commas are mine, of Russian invasion, right? So they blame that Mélenchon, and I mean, he condemns, Mélenchon condemned, and the United Left prior to the last elections in France, they of course condemned Putin's aggression, but they are still saying that we should be neutral in this situation or independent. So Mélenchon accuses Putin of bearing the entire responsibility for the war, covering up NATO's warmongering campaign and its militaristic escalations against Russia, right? This is the quote from this World Socialist website. And another one is, again, quote, but if Putin launched the war, the main responsibility lies with the NATO powers, especially Washington, who did everything to provoke Moscow into launching the invasion, end of quote. So that's the kind of far left position of World Socialist website. I mean, if we look at Mélenchon's or French left position, what they are saying is that, well, we condemn, yet Mélenchon's spokesperson who communicated the official position of his boss said that we condemn the invasion, but France has to be independent. This is the quote. France has to be independent, whatever that may mean, and that we are no longer independent from the USA, right? we need to fight for peace in diplomatic means, right? So this argument of we as the left, as internationalists, need to fight with the for peace with the diplomatic means. Well, I mean, what can you say to this? Well, yeah, of course we should, but I mean, but it's not that, you know, how can you build peace talks with the side that doesn't want to talk, right? So so it just becomes empty rhetoric, really. Now, if we move to Britain, Jeremy Corbyn, a good guy, really. I mean, it's a shame that he lost power within Labour Party, but I mean, his stance on war in Ukraine is also highly questionable, I would say. So he repeatedly said that pouring arms in Ukraine, these are quotations, would prolong and exaggerate the war. More efforts should be placed on securing a ceasefire. He also said that expanding alliance like NATO isn't the best way forward. This is the quote, best way forward. The West should have been together much earlier. Which, with this last claim, I think, yeah, I mean, he's right. Of course, European and other democracies should have intervened earlier, and Zofia, I think, mentioned this and said this, right? So, I mean, where was international community in 2014? I mean, furthermore, Corbyn gives the following reason for the war, and I quote, "I think it is Russian, particularly President Putin's aggression against Ukraine, and I believe that Putin's belief that somehow or other a Russian military presence in Ukraine is a longer-term protection for Russia." So, I mean, let's be clear here. What is he saying? Russia has been threatened by NATO and the West. NATO's imperialism is partly to be blamed. Corbyn also states that the opposition to this war in Russia is pretty strong, and we can, you know, we will interestingly listen to Ilias' presentation later. I mean, and he can comment, of course, on this much more. But to continue the quote, even if people are a bit frightened to speak out, right? A bit frightened to speak out, right? Whereas, you know, reality is, well, it's chauvinistic and fascist. Maybe we can debate about this regime, and yeah, people are threatened now. People in Russia, as far as I know, have to show their support for the special military operation, right? So it's not, you cannot be not everywhere, of course, but in some instances you have to voice your support, actively voice your support for the special military operation. So furthermore, another quote from Corbyn: "Are we in a position to actually use the language of peace and try and bring about a ceasefire through diplomacy?" Well, once again, I mean, I think these are empty words. Now, if we look at Die Linke, well, historically, Die Linke has called for closer ties with Russia, criticized sanctions against the country, and supported the construction of Nord Stream 2 pipeline. When the war started, the position changed, but I would argue not enough. Die Linke's clear support for Russia is no longer there. The party has actually condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine and has repeatedly called for peace. It also criticized Germany's cooperation with the US and NATO. It is against the delivery of weapons. That's Die Linke's official position. This war must end immediately. Must not spread. Solidarity with Ukrainian people on the one hand, and the escalation and every diplomatic effort on the other hand are two sides of the same coin, right? That's the quote again. So these are the main kind of, I mean, I can go on, but I think we get the picture. let me move to more positive aspect of this presentation. So, I mean, and yes, in Lithuania we don't quote Lenin, but I think things are changing. But I think it is appropriate here to precisely quote Lenin and Lenin's view on nationalisms, right? So there is a famous distinction that Lenin makes: the nationalism of the oppressor versus the nationalism of the oppressor. Oppressed. Yeah. We ought to criticize the nationalism of the oppressor, and we need to support the nationalism to a certain extent of the oppressor. And clearly, Ukraine here is the oppressor, and of course, oppressed.
Everybody's oppressed.
Yes, Freudian slip. Yes. So the point. The point is very clear, but I think it is a valid point, very important point. And yes, so we need to support Ukraine here. And I think Zizek, no matter what views you have on Slavoj Zizek, but I think in one of his pieces, I think he's right to say, and I quote, "What is absolutely unacceptable for a true leftist is not only to support Russia, but also to make a more modest, neutral claim that the left is divided between pacifists and supporters of Ukraine, and that one should treat this division as a mirror fact which should not affect the left's global struggle against global capitalism." In other words, I mean, if we are pacifists, then our first goal should be to support global struggle against global capitalism, which is true, but nonetheless not at the cost of supporting Ukraine. Today one cannot be, and further another quote, "Today one cannot be a leftist if one does not unconditionally stand behind Ukraine. To be a leftist who shows understanding for Russia is like to be one of those leftists who, before Germany attacked the USSR, took seriously German anti-imperialism rhetoric directed at the UK and advocated in the war of Germany against France and the UK." I think the point is pretty much clear. Now, what are the real causes of this war? These are. I mean, this question is being debated on a daily basis and will be debated by academics, historians, and so on. But I think, when we analyze the conflict, we need to get to the root causes, and I think there are two reasons, at least from my perspective. First is revanchism, Putin's revanchism, and by that I mean, let's refer to the famous claim that he repeated many times, Putin, that his claim that the collapse of the Soviet Union or USSR was the biggest geopolitical disaster, right? So that he's functioning within this frame of mind, and so there is continuity, and once again it would be interesting to debate this with Russian comrades, between between Soviet Union or post-Soviet transition in Russia and Putin's regime. So he's sort of prolonging this post-Soviet geopolitical space. And another reason would be, revanchism, and another reason I think is Velikoruski chauvinism and imperialism, right? So, and these are the main reasons. And I also interviewed Ilya's comrade from the same university, Greg Yudin, and it is in the last issue of our journal that we publish, Lūžis, the full interview there. So those who read Lithuanian can have a look at it. It's a very, Greg Yudin is a lefty and also an anti-war activist. He was detained by Putin at the beginning of the war. So his take is that Putin thinks that Russia has a superiority of supersonic nuclear weapons over USA and the West or NATO. He thinks, or thought, really, at least at the beginning of the war, that the West or NATO, USA is weak. We will threaten with nukes, and Europe will fall in line. If weapons are not sent to Ukraine, other countries in Eastern Europe will be invaded. To support the opposition in Russia, Ukraine needs to be supported. The left in Europe does not understand what Putin is. This is his, and he's saying, and I think he's right in that it is an important part of neoliberal order, because he buys politicians and people and parties and so on all over Europe. And things that money and that things that, well, West is weak because they are liberals and you can buy them off. We are heading for, and his claim is that we are heading for the nuclear crisis. I'm not going to expand on that, but yes, what is happening at the moment right now as the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is very important. Now, final thought. The message of Socialnyi Rukh to the international left. Well, Russia's war is a war of genocide. I mean, I'm quoting really. Then Putin does not believe that that Ukraine exists. And another really important point is that the international left and the world should stop treating Ukraine as a proxy in the game of global powers. Ukraine and Ukrainian people have a political subjectivity. We are against rotten compromises. People will not accept them in terms of giving up some territories. To be a true internationalist and an imperialist, anti-imperialist, it is paramount important to give help and including arms to Ukraine. And to stop this war is for Ukraine to stop this war as soon as possible, and everyone in Ukraine and Europe wants this, is to make sure that Ukraine stops Russia's aggression. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrius, for your intervention. I thought it was a very rich account of various positions on the international left, also featuring the contributions and voices of Socialnyi Rukh and Ukrainian leftists. I'm not going to open the floor this time to questions because we're really running out of time. So instead of that, please reserve your questions for the Q&A session, which will follow after a break. But before the break, we are still yet to hear from Eglė Murauskaitė. So without any further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the invitation to be here. I think it's a first for me to be on a panel where both Lenin and Trotsky get quoted. I'll try to keep my remarks brief because, and I will start by expressing genuine envy to people who have been horizontally lounging in the shade as opposed to baking here. So, yay to the solidarity of those people in the tent, right? We have survived. I am of the opinion that you can be an ardent supporter of Ukraine, both as things unfold and as a cause, and still have within yourself the capacity for complex thought, a non-reductionist approach that avoids narrative cliches and allows you both compassion and awareness for the broad picture and long-term implications of what's happening. So I'll just try to share a few remarks, not really in any way to be described as leftist or rightist or in any way political, but simply things that, in my opinion, merit keeping in mind and the important questions that I think this crisis has raised across the political spectrum. So first of all, a serious problem that Nina has sort of touched upon is the militarization and the gradually increasing endorsement of violence within the society. In Lithuania, at least, this has been seen as a broadly positive phenomenon. I would probably be much more skeptical about it. So, for instance, one of the newer polls asking throughout Europe, asking for people's support for specifically military type of aid to Ukraine, show that the European average is about a third, 33%. In Western countries such as France and Germany and the UK, that tends to be lower, 29 to 30%. Whereas in Estonia and Lithuania, the numbers are as high as 66 to 60%. So that already sort of starts painting a picture about which people believe in an arms providing better solutions than politics, diplomacy, and sort of the time scale of thinking of things to come. One of the more first the first issue that I would like to sort of broadly touch upon is what do we do in the face of just abominable violence, the war crimes, the horrendous atrocities that continue day in and day out. And unfortunately, some of the more simplistic approaches that we have seen is the rise of what is tantamount to hate speech. I mean, the number of calls in Lithuanian social media, namely Facebook, to kill Russian leaders, Russian political figures, Russian military people, pop stars, even just Russians outright, are mounting and receiving a very warm welcome. I shall not have to elaborate on the epithets that have become standard lingo for describing people as in all sorts of dehumanizing ways. So that's one way of venting, I suppose, but really since when, as a developed society, do we endorse hate speech to such an extent? The other part that has been sort of very promptly, path that has been promptly embraced by Ukraine itself has been prosecution for war crimes. And really both Ukrainian and international legal forces have been thrown into this mechanism with surprising speed. The Ukrainian prosecutorial system is registering 200 to 300 war crime cases every day, and I believe about 100 of them are currently being under prosecution. So compared to the processes that we have seen, say, in Serbia, in Rwanda, in other cases where genocide and war crimes have been happening, to say nothing of the Second World War, Germany and Japan, the speed and expertise available are unprecedented. And yet, this process as an answer to what do we do, to the question what do we do in face of these atrocities, seems highly unsatisfying on both ends. On the one hand, we are seeing the couple of first cases that have been particularly swiftly prosecuted have received wide questioning, if not condemnation, from international legal experts as to the wisdom of conducting these prosecutions in civilian as opposed to military courts, in the proportionality of the sentences handed versus the crimes committed, raising again questions if we are as a society capable of showing more objectivity towards the personified responsibility of the violence that we're seeing, or if we are so inclined to mob justice that really even through the legal route we are unable to divorce ourselves from these emotions. On the other hand, in Ukraine itself, it would appear that the recent sacking of the prosecutor general has been an expression of political frustration that actually, no, these are not hastily put, perhaps not too well considered decisions, but the process is actually too slow. So really neither side seems to be getting the satisfaction, and least of all the victims of these crimes. If we are to pursue this argument in terms of the legal route, the higher road, the appropriate response, the democratic country's way, a little bit further back in history, it would show itself really not necessarily in the prettiest of colors. So really the lessons to draw are pretty limited. If we were to look at, for example, the American incursion into Iraq, and the panel put forth to prosecute Saddam Hussein for his heinous crimes, which seemed at the time again, like the more perhaps humane way to go. The panel has been working for a couple of years, has been widely condemned by human rights organizations across the world as a sham. And Saddam was hanged in the end, which was also seen as a not particularly humane way of carrying out a death sentence, to say nothing whether that was called for. Unfortunately, that did very little for post-conflict restoration and justice, or raising the morale. And really, it did not become any sort of iconic event unifying Iraq or putting society together for moving forward afterwards. If we look at even more recent experiences in Libya, I mean, if the trial is a sham, well, the people there decided to dispense with the legal route altogether. And in the revolutionary fervor of the Arab Spring, a few enthusiasts simply captured and lynched Gaddafi there and then, dragging him out of his palace. Again, we do not see this in retrospect as some sort of a particularly constructive move in helping the Libyan society heal, or even somehow cleansing the political palette for constructive leadership yet to come. So when again next time you're enthusiastically pushing likes to, you know, venting posts on Facebook saying nasty things about Putin and his clique, it does not mean that you would endorse them or hate them any less if you would think twice, and if you would think back to the horrendous historical examples where those words have turned to actions and the consequences they have brought. On the more conservative side, sometimes we hear very loud calls for some sort of country-like justice, to see Russia punished in some way. This brings to mind immediately the war reparations that Germany was forced to pay after World War I. Again, perhaps that was gratifying for a while at a time, but the unfortunate reality is, it is more than likely that once this long conflict, unquestionably provoked by Russia, is over, Russia is very likely to be as much in need of restoration and help and putting its society back together as Ukraine. And these punitive measures that are currently being considered as another alternative, history tells us that, well, they might give us some short-term satisfaction, but their long-term impact is again likely limited. So this leaves us with the pretty unsatisfying lessons to look at. As I said, it should encourage us to look for new dimensions and new answers to these brutalities, rather than embracing wholeheartedly of black and white narratives about the good guys to be lauded and the bad guys to be punished. I'd like to touch upon more broadly again this trend of endorsement for militarization across societies in Europe. The support is increasingly there, even in Germany, where, as I said, currently endorsement for military aid and involvement is just under a third of society, in a country which was traditionally a beacon for diplomacy and economic assistance as a solution. But regardless of whether you consider that the appropriate move or not, all of which are valid, I think a very interesting new development has come through the recent direct involvement of civil society in this. In Lithuanian, this has come through a wildly popular campaign of fundraising for a Bayraktar drone, followed suit shortly by Norway. They did a campaign like that as well. Whereas, again, this might be a symbolic gesture of venting and a show of solidarity, and has some positive aspects to think of. Well, realistically, we are all pitching in. The people who pitched in, they were pitching in to something, for something that will directly result in the deaths of people. And we have not seen something like that in military history before. Such a direct involvement of civilians in lethal action. Again, regardless of whether you endorse it or not, this is definitely something to give you pause. If for no other reason than to bring back the memories of the lengthy debates about the very use of lethal drones when they became commonplace about 10 years ago. I vividly remember the debates concerning even the ethics of killing someone remotely. That is, a direct participation in battle, not from the battlefield, but from a distance. It sort of somewhat harkened back to the very, very old debates about the most ethical ways of killing, be it poison in the antiques, is it an ethical weapon, be it a sword. What do we make of the armed forces? They are sort of removed and are not seeing people dying. They're looking at it from the bird's view. Well, if the debates about the use of lethal drones as opposed to a legal process, if their authorization and the civilian operator involvement in that process resonated with you and perhaps made you consider things twice, this newly popular activism of simply fundraising for such drones ought to then, by extension, give you even more pause and food for thought. The final point that I want to touch upon is, again, an aspect of people getting directly involved in the war in Ukraine, and that is foreign fighters. This is a subject that I've been researching for several years now. And of course, right now, when the conflict in Ukraine is still unfolding, hard data is very difficult to come by. But the broad sort of expert understanding is that there are several thousand pro-Ukrainian fighters and probably about half as many joining the cause on the pro-Russian side. Without going into too much details about the profiles and motivations that drive people in there, the couple of points I would like to raise are the following. First of all, the coverage that these fighters tend to get. An issue I raised already back when the conflict wasn't a war, when it was a much more simmering gray zone conflict in the early 2015 and 16. The highly, sort of the way you tended to read about foreign fighters then, and you sort of still do today, are in the glossy cover stories where it's a highly personalized report in Vice, the New Yorker, even Deutsche Welle, what have you, with lots of pictures and lots of very personal stories. Interestingly enough, there has been a direct link between the showcasing of these fighters, some of who are professionals, some of whom less so. If you're interested, you can. I could direct you to research to read about it. But there has been a direct link between such glorifying profiles and the overwhelming outreach of untrained, unqualified civilian adventurers trying to get into the battlefield, which puts an undue burden on the people processing them and basically takes the resources away, usually, from the fighting to protecting these people who are bundled together in no small numbers without appropriate arms or training somewhere near the battlefield. So the media glorification of violence, and even if you would think about it in such, relatively positive terms, right? Taking up arms to really put your action where your thoughts are, to really go and stand up and fight for something you believe in. Well, the people who have walked the walk and fought the fight might have different opinions about the value of you basically standing up from this tent and taking the train to the nearest training center. Again, this should help inform your discourse when somebody casually mentioned, oh, a Ukrainian man, why aren't you there? Well, there are pretty good reasons to mention a few, right? In the concluding parts of this point, I think it's also important to start thinking about the lack of compatibility of this public discourse about hero glorification and the practical thought for the aftermath of this war. Some countries, since 2014, have legalized and even very publicly endorsed foreign fighting in Ukraine. However, none absolutely 0 countries have instituted any sort of programs or help mechanisms for people who return having fought in Ukraine. There are no public programs comparable to regular army veterans that could help them deal with health issues, with psychological issues, that could help them with reintegration into the society, because it might not be so easy to just, sit basically in your car after having witnessed some awful action and, go to the supermarket and proceed as you were. So giving absolutely no forethought about how to care for these people who are, in my opinion, quite often, pretty mindlessly encouraged, is also something very important and something that we will all have to deal with once this conflict ends. In terms of fighters, both foreign and local, because huge numbers of Ukrainians are in the field, huge numbers of Ukrainians have flown in from abroad to join the fight. I am yet to hear of any considerations about their fate once the fighting is over. The traditional talks about reconciliation, disarmament, reintegration, nowhere to be heard right now. Of all the venting mechanisms and attempts to deal with the traumas that we're seeing now that I have discussed, the legal route, the public discourse, encouragements to fight, these are not the only ways. I mean, we have seen processes like truth and reconciliation commissions chosen instead of these witch hunts, and in some countries they have shown pretty promising success stories. Perhaps that could be one of the ways to be considered. It is definitely not my place to say. It is for the Ukrainian society to agree within itself what is the best way to heal it. But I think my main point that I want you to take away from my talk is that things are complex. There are no simple answers and no simple narratives. And we must not give in to the horrors that we're witnessing. We must not give in to the temptation to respond with the same horror or think that if we fail to do so, we are somehow being defenseless, helpless, or betraying Ukraine. So I encourage you to stand with Ukraine thoughtfully in complexity as life is. Thank you.